Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us live from the MSP studio in Bootle for Liverpool Chamber's latest event in our series looking at a strategic approach to 2021. 2020 has been such a unique year, and I think we've all experienced something that we never thought we would. We've been determined throughout this whole process, as we developed this event programme, to look with positivity towards 2021, having been through such a difficult period in 2020. Today's session brings together some absolute experts in the fields of property construction and infrastructure development in Liverpool. And I'm delighted with the calibre of panel that we're bringing with you today. We've got the Chief Executive of Liverpool City Council, Tony Reeves. We have Dave Saville, Business Unit Director from Waits, joining me here in the studio. We've got Jessica Bowles, Director of Strategy from Bruntwood. We've got Adam Mukhtar, Director of Archiphonic. And we've got Andrew Waugh, Real Estate Sector Lead for Brabner's. I'm going to start by asking Tony Reeves to say a few words, given the incredible efforts from our local authority in recent weeks whilst we've been tackling the immediate threat of this pandemic and enabling Liverpool to be at the forefront of our nation's solution. Tony, welcome this morning. I'm sure a lot of our members are really looking forward to hearing you talk about the immediate challenges that you and your colleagues have faced in recent weeks, and also looking ahead to 2021.
Thanks, Paul. And indeed, we are in strange times when people are looking forward to hearing from a local government bureaucrat, I must say. But great to be here with you all. And perhaps we could go back to the early part of the year, to February, March time, when it was clear that the pandemic was going to have a big impact on the UK. And as we started to go into national lockdown, and with our partners in Liverpool, including Paul from the Chamber, we worked out very quickly this was going to be an economic crisis as well as a health crisis. And we needed to do three things as a city council. One, we had to very quickly transition our organisation into a very different way of working so that we could maintain our focus on the strategic imperatives for the city. And we managed to get more than 4,000 people working from home in under a week without our systems crashing. I don't quite know how we did it. I have to say at the time I wasn't hugely confident, but we did it. And I think we did it pretty successfully and learned an awful lot about agile working, which is a journey we were already on. Secondly, we needed to mobilize very, very quickly in terms of the response to the crisis and how we really addressed those issues and put in place proper emergency planning structures that linked in with the Merseyside Resilience Forum, made links to government and a whole host of other places, a lot of joint working with our NHS colleagues and a whole range of other partners at a local level, including making sure that the public in Liverpool and businesses in Liverpool, etc., had access to good, coherent information. Sometimes, if I'm brutally honest, the information coming out of Whitehall wasn't always that coherent. So we tried really hard to make sure that we were able to give clear information that worked in the context of Liverpool as part of that, and working with our city region partners across the whole of Merseyside and the city region. So the third thing we needed to do, and we did this right from the outset, was to start to focus on the economy and economic recovery. And we knew, and unfortunately, experience has borne this out, that we were likely to face significant economic shock or shocks with this pandemic that had the potential to last some time. We believed there would be a real crisis in terms of employment in a city that still has, unfortunately, far too much poverty in parts of the city. And, you know, the expectation is that poor cities get hit hardest in recessions and quite often take longest to recover. So the need to really focus on economic recovery as quickly as possible was there. And we actually appointed, in the first couple of weeks of lockdown, we appointed a firm called Metro Dynamics from Manchester, who a lot of you will know, and I've worked with in the past, to come and work with us to develop an economic recovery plan. I have to say it's probably my best decision of the year in doing that. Great support from the Mayor and others in doing that. And we worked really, really effectively to develop an economic recovery plan. And the intention there wasn't just about dealing with the economic challenges of Brexit, Brexit as well, but of the pandemic, but also, if I'm brutally honest, not to waste the crisis. And in my experience, cities that are prepared to be bold and prepared to be agile can reposition themselves relative to other places if they really grasp the nettle quickly and move at pace, and critically move in a way that it's not the council doing something, but really engaging business partners, universities, etc., in the work that you're doing. And I had that experience in Bradford in the last recession, where Bradford, in a very, very different place economically to where Liverpool is coming into this crisis, we did some really bold things that moved the city and its regeneration forward at some pace. And we developed the economic recovery plan. It was the first on the government's desk by about 6 weeks. And I think government colleagues will still say it's probably the best, the most coherent, underpinned by proper business cases, etc. And we're still, the detail of the comprehensive spending review is still coming out. We're still expecting some further communication. And of course, there's the levelling up bidding pot that we will be bidding into. And all of that work, that groundwork, stands us in good stead. But at the same time as developing the plan, we were already working really hard. We listening to businesses. We recognised that when the business grant support scheme came in, that there was an absolute urgency to get money out of the door and support small businesses. I seem to remember, Paul, you and others telling us that April payroll was absolutely critical, because lots of our business, particularly small businesses in the visitor economy and the hospitality economy, carried on average about 15 days cash. They had no cash, and we needed to hit April payday, and we worked all over the Easter weekend. And I think over a weekend, we processed about 35 or 40 million pounds worth of payments and got those out to our businesses. At the same time, we built a dossier of evidence, or a portfolio of evidence, with other colleagues in the Northwest that we led on, to communicate to government the limitations of the scheme and some case studies of the types of businesses that were just falling outside the parameters that we believed government didn't intend to miss out on that support. And as a result of that, work from the whole of the Northwest, but with Liverpool leading it, without sounding boastful, probably was a bit boastful, but we managed to convince the government to come up with a discretionary business grant scheme that, in my view, wasn't huge, but it saved dozens and dozens of businesses and a lot of jobs in the city to help those businesses get through that process. So I think what we've tried to do is to be really, really proactive all the way through this crisis, to get very, very close to business. I've been on weekly calls with business leaders. I've done, I don't know how many seminars like this that I've participated in, and lots of my colleagues have as well. And we've tried to be really engaged. We've worked very closely with the combined authority, with Mark Bousfield, Frank Rogers, Steve Rotherham, and team over there, to make sure we're really aligned, and city working at the heart of the city region. And our recovery plan was submitted jointly by the two mayors, and we contributed to the wider city region plan, of which ours sits in there. So we've tried to be really aligned, really engaged. And when we came to open up the economy after the first lockdown, I think we did that more successfully than almost any other place in the country. And it was really interesting that a couple of months ago, myself and our Director of Culture, the brilliant Claire McColgan, who a lot of you will know, had a call from the Special Advisor from the Minister for London, asking how to go about opening up the economy in the way that we had done. It's not usual for Liverpool to get a call from London in that way, to be honest. So it sort of gave us a bit of confidence that we were doing okay. We got close to 80% of our footfall back in the city centre. Then obviously in the late summer, early autumn, the data started to sound the alarm bells, and we started to escalate into crisis in terms of a second wave that seemed to hit Liverpool and the city region very, very quickly. And we ended up being the first set of authorities to go into tier 3. And again, our approach right from the outset, having listened very carefully to our businesses, was this is inevitable. We need to get in here, get the best deal we can, but get these restrictions in place quickly so that we have a fighting chance of opening up parts of our economy for Christmas, recognizing how crucial December is for a lot of businesses. And obviously yesterday's announcement, I hope, vindicated that strategy. It's, there's nothing to celebrate because a lot of our businesses are still closed down and the next few months are going to be incredibly tough. But I think the hard work we've all done, and it's not the council, it's a huge partnership effort from across the city, all our public sector partners, academia and business working really hand in glove with us and the wider city region, has given us a fighting chance to save some very good businesses. And I think the tier 2 decision, coupled with the decision to have some flexibility around 10 o'clock opening for hospitality, which allows second sittings in our restaurants, makes a massive difference in terms of the profitability of those businesses in the crucial Christmas period. So nothing to celebrate. We've still got really hard yards ahead, but I think this gives us a fighting chance to be one of the places in the UK that comes out of this crisis fastest, more joined up, more focused, having learned a lot of lessons. And the challenge, we've got some great capital projects that we're going to be taking forward. We've asked government to support those, but let me be absolutely brutally honest, with or without government support, we're going to find a way to deliver those great projects to build on the success already. The Knowledge Quarter in Liverpool, we're working really closely with L&G and Bruntwood, the 2 universities, through our Scientech partnership. And that I think has huge potential in the immediate period after this. So the mantra for me is we're going to come out of this faster, better and more safely than any other city if we get our act together and get this right. And that is our purpose going forwards. A really, really tough couple of years ahead. Really worried about long-term effects of economic scarring, etc. All we can do, we can't sort the macroeconomic environment, but we can make sure, because of the strength of our partnership working and our really sharp focus on the things that need to be done here, that we can do this better and faster than anywhere else. And that's certainly what we're going to aim to do.
Tony,
thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Tony. And I'm conscious I want to give you a moment to have a drink in a second to refresh. But you mentioned a couple of things there that have certainly been evident. Obviously we've met so many times over the last several months and working on a lot of this stuff. You talk about collaboration, and you've also talked repeatedly in the context of the economic recovery plan and in terms of how Liverpool presents itself to the outside world, about making investment propositions almost rather than a begging bowl when we're going to, when we're looking for investments and we're looking for external opportunities and we're going to government with propositions. Can you evaluate or maybe measure the extent to which this approach has positioned us to benefit in 2021 when it comes to investment? How does this approach and our reputation gain through first in line for mass testing, first in line for smart release? Who knows what will happen in terms of vaccinations? The public health and the collaboration that's taken place, how does that serve us well when it comes to inward investment in 2021?
Look, the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating, Paul, to see how much investment we get and whether we get these great projects moving forward. And they're all potential catalysts for a lot of growth around this. So we're talking about Littlewood Studio. We're talking about the next major building at Paddington Village. We're talking about the first major development in Upper Central. That's the significant area between the universities and Lime Street Station, Central Station. the Adelphi Hotel, including Mount Pleasant Car Park. There's potential about 2.5 million square feet of development there over the coming years that we're looking to take forward jointly with Liverpool John Moore University and Scientech, as I touched on earlier. Proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. I'm not going to, I'm very confident we can take all of those projects forward. Put it into context, in the last recession, there was one mixed-use scheme of scale developed in the north of England at the height of the recession. And I think we've got 3 or 4 absolutely key projects that we can get off the ground next year to really get us moving forwards. But the key thing is that we make an offer to the outside world about what Liverpool is about. We do that confidently. We do that joined up. I learned, early on in my career, leading on coalfield regeneration after the pits closed in South Yorkshire, that if you stick your hand out and, pardon the expression, but convey to the outside world, it's shit around here and we need some help, it's not a very investable proposition, quite frankly. We need to talk about our strengths. We need to talk about our vision. We need to have plans in place so that when people scratch the surface, which investors always will do, they see real substance beneath that and have credible partners articulating those messages. Then I think we can position our place in a really confident way. Liverpool has a massive international brand reach that will match any city outside London, quite frankly. It's got all sorts of assets. What we've tried to do is to bring those together into a coherent vision for what we're trying to achieve in the city in the coming years. And I think there's a growing confidence. When I say we, I mean all of us. The city plan does that. It's not the council's plan, it's the whole city's plan. The business, all the public sector partners, etc., and the voluntary sector have participated in. And I think there's that sense of shared purpose and clarity of vision that is now starting to interest people. And the messages I'm getting, that it feels like the city's really getting its act together, building on the years of progress that started, I think, probably from 2008 with European City of Culture. And this is about the next phase of a journey. Please don't anybody get the impression I'm saying that I've arrived here and all of a sudden everything's dropped into place. That's not the case. We're building on years of progress, but it is about this next crucial period and how we absolutely position ourselves for that. And that's what we've been trying to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tony. And I think that provides a perfect context to bring in some of our other panellists and to let them introduce themselves to you. And I'm going to start in the studio with Dave Saville from Waits Group, who's going to tell us a little bit about Waits, about your role, responsibility, and some of your thoughts heading into 2021 about the most exciting opportunities and challenges.
Thank you, Paul. And firstly, thank you for the Chamber for inviting us here today. As you say, my name's Dave Saville. I'm the Business Unit Director for Waits in the North West. For those who don't know, Waits is a 123-year-old family-owned construction group which delivers construction activities and property support as well. We're active in Greater Liverpool, Greater Manchester, Cheshire, Lancashire and Cumbria, and do some work in North Wales as well. Pleased to say we've got offices here in Liverpool. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get in them recently because of COVID, and the same in Manchester as well. And our staff, when we look at our demographic, 50% of our staff come from the Greater Liverpool area. The sectors we tend to work in at the moment are education, residential, commercial and manufacturing, and recently we've done quite a lot of work in the area, particularly with Holton and St Helens around blue light facilities. Perspective on the years ahead, it's been a tough 6 months for construction, but at the same time I think we've had quite a lot of support. I think the government's decision to support the industry throughout and allow us to continue to operate has been a decisive one, and in many ways reflects how important our industry is to the economy. There's no denying that COVID and the pandemic has impacted on turnover generally in the industry, and we had to make some tough decisions locally about right sizing in April and March. But Working closely with the Construction Leadership Council, we found ways to safely operate our sites, and I'm pleased to say that we actually only shut our construction operations down for 2 days, simply to just stop, recheck what we were doing and continue on. As far as the team working in the offices, we took the decision to work from home predominantly throughout both lockdowns. And interestingly, that taught us a lot about ourselves. As an industry, we're perhaps not the most progressive at times, particularly around the adoption of IT services and the likes. And we found new ways to work, new ways to communicate, new ways to demonstrate what we're doing on our sites and attract new people to our businesses as a result. It was mentioned by Tony that the payments from the public sector, which were focused on early in April and March, again benefited us as a business. Many of our public sector clients were able to pay us early, if not on time, through agreements that had been sent through public procurement notes, and we were subsequently able to support our supply chain as a result of that. The furlough process did benefit us as well, there's no doubt about it, and having made tough decisions in March and April around the size of our business, I'm pleased to say that we've so far weathered the storm, and the future is actually looking quite bright for us in 2021 when we look at our pipeline. I think the main areas that we sort of are thankful for really is public sector procurement frameworks, which the bulk of our local business is based upon. Unfortunately, throughout the past 2 years, we've been operating in pre-construction around a number of projects from Cumbria down to North Wales, which have meant that we've been able to convert work during the pandemic, and we've also been able to complete work in the pandemic, and in many ways our operations have continued somewhat as normal. When we look towards the future though, we are in many ways positive because we have quite a strong pipeline, but obviously Brexit, public sector spend, particularly on capital projects, as Tony Reeves has mentioned, are key to our continued success and desire to grow and support the local economy. I'm very pleased to say that we have seen an upturn in the pipeline of work, particularly around education, and indeed the likes of businesses like Bruntwood continuing on to invest in both the Liverpool area and the Manchester area do create opportunity for the construction sector. And with that, we then hopefully benefit the local economy, one by creating necessary revenue and spend, but also giving back, particularly offering opportunity for re-employment, education and training. And we are looking forward in 2021 to be working closely with the Liverpool Construction Partnership in order to support the local economy in getting people back to work and offering training on our projects. We're keen to see what will happen around Brexit. The reality is COVID has impacted on our pipeline with regard to material procurement, obtaining resource in order to deliver our schemes, and having seen that hump over the last 6 months and finding ways to work around it, it will be intriguing to find where Brexit positions us in Q1 and Q2 of next year. Hopefully, actually, COVID has taught us a few lessons around that, and we have contingency plans in place now which will help us deal with these matters. And I suppose finally for us, I think the key really is to find collaborative ways to work with our clients at these challenging times. The traditional risk profiles we've dealt with in many years in construction have changed. We have to find ways to support our clients and indeed their investors to allow these capital projects to move forward with pace, and we're very keen to find a collaborative solution around that.
Thank you very much, Dave. That's a really good overview, and we'll come back to some of those points during the questions and answers. And you very helpfully name-checked Bruntwood, and I'm going to bring in Jessica next. Seamless, that, wasn't it? Jessica, over to you, please.
Thanks very much, and Thank you for inviting me onto today's panel. I'm really delighted to be here, although I really wish I was in the MSP studios, which looks super cool. And I thought my office was a nice background, but that's definitely better. So well done for using that space. Bruntwood, just a little bit about us for those who may not know who we are. We're a family-owned commercial property company. We've been around for 40 years, a bit more, operating in the Northwest, but also across the other regional cities in the North and Midlands. We are a bit unusual as a property company. We both invest and develop in our buildings, but we continue to own them, let and manage them directly basically for the long term, and that gives us quite an interesting perspective on places and a real need to be closely connected to places, and a sort of gives us a role in being part of that city community, and we've heard quite a lot about that from both Tony and Dave. So really kind of that's sort of where we come from, and I suppose that sets some of the scene for what I'm going to talk about that's happened so far this year and what we think we're looking forward to in 2021. We've been invested in Liverpool for many years through a commercial property portfolio to start with, but also through our SciTech division. We created a joint venture with Legal and General Capital 2 years ago to really allow us to work with cities and partners in cities to support the development of their science and tech facilities and their science and tech industries, recognising that there was a massive amount of assets, both IP, intellectual capital, people, assets. The universities had a great desire to move on, and cities knew that science and technology needed to be at the heart of their forward trajectory. And we knew from the work we'd already been doing in Manchester that bringing a commercial partner into the mix could really often just add something to the pace and scale of delivery, and could bring some capital investment that would really support those ambitions. So we created SciTech 2 years ago, and I'll come back onto that in a moment. So I mean, I suppose looking back, this has been a very unusual year. I think it sort of goes without saying. No one could have anticipated this as we sat here on the 27th of November a year ago. COVID hadn't even been heard about. And I think what's astonishing is the way that people have responded. And we've heard pieces of this already this morning. Tony, got his council working within a week, 4,000 people from home. Construction sector waits stopped for 2 days. We had our own experiences of that too, and people responded very fast. And I think in a way, despite the backdrop, it gave people a huge confidence that you could make things happen, and you could do that quickly. And from our perspective as a business, we recognised very fast that we just needed to continue our focus on creating thriving cities, on being a good partner within our cities, and that was in everyone's long-term interest, all of the partners that we worked with, and our own business interest. And so we continued that commitment, and we were really lucky to work with Tony on the early recovery plan. I thought it was fantastic that Liverpool were, as quickly as they were getting people working from home, were also saying, well, what are we going to do next? How are we going to use this period to recover stronger and faster? And I think that was a very exciting thing to do, and a very important thing about galvanising a partnership within the city. And it's quite often these moments of crisis that really test the mettle of partnerships, places, people, and I think that's done that in Liverpool. And I think as a sign of our continued commitment to the city, we continued with our discussions around investing in science tech as a business, and we concluded that deal. I think it was in April, which was for a number of reasons, really. One was, we know the fundamentals of science and tech in Liverpool are very, very strong. There's a massive, rich asset base to build on. But also what we could see was real partnership working already happening around the Knowledge Quarter, but wider within the city and the city region, and that sort of sense of clear leadership and vision. And we love working in places like that. And when you have that mix of things, it's really... there's a real opportunity and an opportunity to be dynamic and fast, and we're very excited about the Science Tech partnership for the future. I'm just going to say three quick things because I'm conscious that we've all overrun our few minutes, but three quick things as I look ahead to 2021 that I think are really fundamental for Liverpool City Region, Liverpool and the businesses and partners there. The first is continuing to focus around the vision of what we're trying to create in Liverpool, the strategy of how we're going to get there, and that sort of partnership-based leadership. And we're really, that will pay dividends. And I think that you can already see that the clarity of where you wanted to get to and then continuing to chart that course has been tremendously important. With a real focus on the strengths of the place, not just identical cookie cutter city, but what is it that is particularly unique about Liverpool that we can build on. The second, I think, is around green investment, and we haven't touched on that yet today, but I think there is an opportunity to do something very special through this recovery. Government is going to be investing billions and billions of pounds in economic restructuring and recovery one way or another. It may not be enough billions, but they will be investing, and let's make sure it's in the right things. And we can do that, as Tony said, by coming up with really strong investable propositions. And the third is continuing to make the case with government about place-based investment. I'm quite concerned at the £4 billion that was about the Levelling Up Fund, but that is being held centrally by government for individual bids for individual projects, total 20 million quid. I mean, it's not the way to go if you want to see real systemic change in our cities across the north. And so making the case for place-based investment in infrastructure, transport infrastructure, that's my passion, but also in R&D, really essential that we do that, and in skills, because without having the right skills in the place that match your opportunities, we are not going to support the people who need to be helped through this period, so that we don't have so that we can minimise the economic scarring that we're going to see through COVID.
Thank you very much, Jessica. That was a fantastic overview, and please don't apologise for the timekeeping. That's entirely down to the moderator. Let me introduce Adam Mukhtar, Director of Archiphonic, who will give a shorter overview as well.
Yeah, cheers. And again, appreciate the invite, etc. As has been said, I'm Adam Mukhtar of architectural design firm Archiphonic. We're 8 years old, so not quite as old as everybody else in this panel. But and my role and responsibility is primarily as director to really lead from the front and be the example to the rest of the team exactly what we need to go and do. And primarily that largely comes from positivity in the face of adversity, I would largely say, which echoes a lot of the comments that Tony was talking about earlier, in terms of in order to go and keep maintaining and continue moving forward as an organisation, regardless of the circumstances of COVID or Brexit or otherwise. It's really important to maintain that objective positivity throughout that. So our sectors that we're predominantly involved in is the residential sector, predominantly with mixed use schemes. We're also involved in like kind of the industrial sector, and we have been involved in the aviation in Heathrow a number of years ago. But since then we were concentrated in Liverpool. And the northwest region, predominantly moving into North Wales. in terms of the way that we've operated over the last 6 months, I think I would probably echo a lot of comments that would be passed by a lot of SMEs. That we prior to the COVID situation, we were all feeling like we finally had things nailed, and we're moving in a really, really, really positive direction. And COVID came at that moment to kind of stop a lot of us in our tracks. Our team was 7 people at that time, and we did have to go and take advantage of the furlough scenario, essentially reducing our numbers down to 4, including the 2 directors. But due to the strength of our team and the way that we built it in the past, we did manage to bring back everybody within the 2-month cycle. And a lot of the things that we put in place prior over the 8 years, in terms of systems, in terms of back office automation, in terms of the way that we were looking at the productivity internally, and our continued communication with our team, both from a production and like kind of business, the luxuries as an SME to do so, the actual like friendly nature of the firm, that was fantastic for us to go and take into the COVID situation. And through that strength, we did manage to push through and really make it happen for us. And then we did see a huge amount of projects drop off our pipeline, but conversely, a lot of our clients also have the positive nature and looked at it as an opportunity. And I don't know, that's a bit of a cliche, but they really did. And for that reason, we have grown to now 11 members of the team. Recruiting during this situation has been very strange. But we have managed to have a fantastic situation of growth for us, and the pipeline for us does look great in the future. I'm sure we'll touch in terms of the operational challenges, etc., that we overcame during that process, which I'm sure a lot of people had similar experiences. In terms of 21, it's looking fantastic for us as well. And while we don't anticipate growing the team much further than where we are now, it is really exciting to go and see the leaders of the city and this common kind of attitude towards Liverpool as a whole, really, and understanding that we as a city have so much to offer. And it's and that is echoed through the smaller companies, the SMEs, etc., all the way up to the top and to the council. So what's going to be most exciting for us really is just seeing how that wave kind of lands, and ensuring that we do maintain that. In terms of the challenge, because architecture is largely about the collaboration, and construction as a whole is largely about the collaboration, but we usually bounce ideas off each other in terms of design and attitudes and complex problem solving. The challenge will be to maintain that morale, and while we have mechanisms internally of how to go and kind of keep that going. It does rely on that objective, like kind of positivity to go and ensure that we do all overcome whatever challenges do present themselves. So I'd probably like to leave that there.
That's great, Adam. Thanks so much, and we'll come back very shortly when we have our Q&A. Finally, I'd like to introduce Andrew Wharf, who is real estate sector lead for Brabner's.
Thanks very much, Paul. Well, first of all, I have to say it's quite humbling, really, to hear yourself, Paul, and certainly Tony, run through all the challenges that you've faced and been dealing with. We all think that we're doing our best and a good job in trying to keep our teams on track. and get through the difficult times. But of course, we're seeing our companies and our sector. And of course, when you hear the council's perspective and you hear the much wider cross-sector view that they have to take, it is really quite humbling. And I think we can all be very grateful that we've got such a proactive public sector in this city. So against that backdrop, my role is real estate sector lead at Brabner's, which is a large commercial law firm with offices in Liverpool, Manchester and Preston. My role is to essentially lead a team of about 100 real estate lawyers across all disciplines within the real estate sector, for commercial, residential, industrial, right across the piece, regeneration, investment and retail, all aspects of the property spectrum really. That means that we have quite good visibility on the way that people have had to face the different challenges and how they've responded. So what I was going to do is try and draw on some of that to share those lessons, one from our own perspective as a business, and two from the visibility we've had with clients and the way they've faced things. So I think really when we look at the perspective on next year, I think we can draw a lot from this year and how we've dealt with it and use that to inform how we think next year is going to look. I think it's been touched on already that it started off as a health crisis, very quickly descended into an economic crisis of some considerable magnitude. But I think the great thing for this particular audience and this sector is we have a real advantage in that the market dynamics in this sector fundamentally remain as they were. It's not a market collapse because prices have gone crazy or whatever. We're probably a lot better placed as a sector to recover than for example, food and hotels and hospitality and so on, who are facing much bigger challenges. So I think if we touch on each of the areas, housing, I think obviously the pent-up demand that was there before, we think still exists very strongly. Commercial property and offices and so on, there's a little bit of nervousness, I would say, amongst the private sector funders, just because inevitably the way they analyse things and anything uncertain tends to mean a pause button's hit. I think there's a huge, huge positive in the very clear statements from the public sector that they are there to catalyse the spend is going to be hugely helpful to restore the buoyancy and the momentum. So that's a good thing. I think we're arguably in a stronger position, I think, when it comes to offices, because I think previously people thought, where was the future of offices? Were people going to work more remotely and so on? Ironically, I think the super acceleration, if you like, of remote working that we've all faced this year has, I would say, actually put us into a different place, arguably made the offices look at a stronger proposition going forward than they were previously. Because I think whereas previously we had the millennials wanting to work from home, the younger generation, if you like, wanting to work more from home and work from Starbucks or whatever it might be, didn't see the need to come into the office, and you'd have the older ones amongst us say, no, you've got to come in, you've got to work the traditional way. It's almost flipped on its head, because I think the more senior people in organisations have found it so much more productive just to do their thing, got loads cleared. But of course, the missing piece then is the training and development of the younger team. And I think the younger team have realised that perhaps more rapidly and acutely than the older generation. So I think that's actually going to be a real positive for the property sector in terms of offices. I'm sure it will inevitably evolve the way that the office model goes, and Bruntwood are a very, very good example of how they do this already and engage as a place, and the way they engage with the tenants, if you like, in the buildings as partners rather than just people who rent space from them. And I think that model is going to stand us in very good stead. And as a city, I think we're well placed with some of the space we've already got with that. So I think the office market's going to be strong going into 2021. Initially, it'll be difficult, but I think in the longer term, it'll be stronger. Industrial and logistics, clearly, as a city, we're very well placed to handle those aspects. There's been a supercharging acceleration of that, I think, in terms of the way that spend as consumers has changed this year with so much more online trading. Again, I think it doesn't necessarily kill the high street in any respect. And again, we've got the city behind it saying, let's make sure the high street remains strong for different reasons. It's not just about spending in shops. Of course, that's a big part of it, but it's the overall experience of being in the city. And I think we're very lucky that we've got the City Council behind that initiative and drive to make sure that's retained. So I think as a city, we're very, very, very well placed with the multimodal transport links that we've got. We're better placed, I would say, than arguably any other city to come out strongly with industrial. In terms of infrastructure, again, the public sector's commitment to that is going to be a huge catalyst. So looking forward, generally, I think our perspective on 2021 is that it's going to be obviously difficult to get going initially, but after that, I think we're going to come back very strongly. I think the office, as I touched on, is going to be a lot more relevant going forward. A lot of the habits that we've carried from lockdown, I think, will stay. So things like this, where we've got the remote ability to speak to a big audience and connect like this, is great. We'll take lessons like that forward, but it doesn't change the fundamentals that people still want to be in an office space and so on. In terms of how we can accelerate growth going forward, the way that we as a business are trying to accelerate growth and get things back to where we need them to be is to try and engage a lot more proactively with our client base, to try and share lessons learned across clients and across different sectors, to try and help them see the patterns that we're seeing, so we can make sure that they find things out that they didn't already know. And if they already know them, at least it gives them the confidence that they're already doing the right things, which I'm sure is true of a lot of the people on this call today. It's, you know, yourselves putting this sort of forum on is so valuable, because it helps people see what they haven't seen already. And if they're doing things that other people are doing, it galvanizes that they know that they're moving in the right direction. So a lot more of that is what we're going to be doing in 2021, which is that proactive engagement with our clients to make sure that we help them with the lessons that we've seen from other clients. Using webinars and training sessions is a key part of what we've done so far to try and do that and share with our client base. We've also adopted as a business a bit more of a campaign-based approach, where we're trying to effectively open the eyes of our clients to other things that are going on in other sectors. So, for example, the manufacturing and logistics, to bring that into some of the discussions that we're having with our clients, to make sure that things to do with well-being of staff and engagement with the supply chain and the public sector commitment to spending is all factored in, so that people can see. Everyone's so head down at the moment running their own business. I think it's very high risk that they'll miss these things. So our job, as far as we can see, is to give people visibility on that they've not necessarily got time to get their heads up to look at. So in terms of going forward, I think looking at this year, I think there's a very strong case for a buoyant property sector, particularly in Liverpool, because we're lucky enough to have the proactive public sector behind us. We've got the obvious areas that have been touched on by the speakers today with logistics. We've got the Knowledge Quarter, Science Parks, which puts us as a city very far ahead of others, I would say. And I think fundamentally it's down to us as a sort of closing comment, if you like, to really be thankful for that support that we've got and use that catalyst to make sure that we talk about how we can get through the other side of this. And as leaders of businesses, we've got to make sure that we instill that confidence in everybody that we're working with to show that we can get through it, rather than stand here navel gazing about how tough it is and how we're all stuck in it. And it's great to hear that everybody on this call has been very much of that mindset, and that's absolutely led by the council. So I think looking forward, 2021 is looking a difficult start, I'm sure, but towards the mid part and beyond, I think it's looking very good for the property sector.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew. That's really, really helpful. And thank you all to our panellists for their comments there. One of the recurring themes that came across through pretty much all of your contributions was about Liverpool's positioning in terms of its innovation, in terms of the economic recovery plan, and that alignment of strategy and vision. And I just wonder, in terms of how does that sort of positioning really help your business strategy going into 2021? I'm going to start with Dave here. Dave, you talked a little bit about some of the work you've done in Greater Liverpool and the Northwest. So how can that sort of message and that ecosystem really help you as an organisation achieve what you want to achieve?
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I joined the business just over 18 months ago, and what became apparent to me was that we had become quite specialised in our sectors, not necessarily intentionally, but our clients took us that way, particularly around the education sector. And having worked in and around this region for many years, I was keen to diversify our offering in many ways, so we could increase our presence, particularly in the Greater Liverpool area. So the current regeneration policies in Liverpool in particular around the science, the industry, the innovation and health align very well with our wish to diversify into them sectors. We have, over the last year or so, expanded our capabilities in these areas. We've got some great people who can deliver there, and we've got a great supply chain willing to support us in that. So we're keen to become more active, it's fair to say, in the Greater Liverpool area and certainly in the city. We had set out in re-establishing an office earlier in the year, as I said, which was part of that strategy, which unfortunately got somewhat paused by the impact of COVID. But we arrived with renewed vigour and intent in 2021 to build on that and become more present and also, as was mentioned by Adam, find collaborative ways and continue the collaborative approaches we've had to take up in many ways to deal with the pandemic and take them forward into our business practices, hopefully for many years to come.
And for the panellists, we've talked about Brexit, we've talked about COVID, and to some extent, how robust do panel members feel the actual sector is, both from a Liverpool City region perspective, but also in terms of the Northwest? Do we feel that we're in a resolute, robust position to capitalise in 2021, or are there some challenges that we need to overcome? Jessica, maybe bring you in there.
Yeah, I think obviously there are challenges to overcome, and it would be foolish to say that there weren't as we look ahead. I think some of the fundamentals are good because we are focusing on strengths and assets, and we've got partnership arrangements which will help with that. But there will be very significant challenges, I think, particularly the unknowns around Brexit, and I find it astonishing that we're heading, with 6 weeks away from this, and we don't even really know what it's going to be. That uncertainty is very difficult, and uncertainty is always hard when you're thinking about investment. I think it's worth, though, saying that as a sector, I think we're heading into this in a different way than we did in the financial crash, and this is a different kind of crisis. The economic consequences are likely to be long and deep, but we are heading into it in a different, from a different, more robust place, I think. And what we've also seen, encouragingly, is very low levels of business failure so far. I know there's been a lot of support provided, and we need to be very careful about how that gets unwound and how we continue to support customers within our spaces and businesses within the city as a whole. But there have been so far, what we haven't seen is a mass exodus of businesses from office spaces. Retailers from their spaces have been more challenged, but it hasn't been at the worst end that we've modelled as we went into this crisis yet. So I think...
Is there a sense, Jessica, on that front, is it that that's been deferred because of the support mechanism, or is that because of the inherent strength of the sector at this point in time, and can it endure through to, what we hope in the summer of next year will be some semblance of normality?
Yeah, I'm a pretty optimistic person, so I find it quite hard to take a really dim view of what's going to happen as this unwinds. I think what we have got is support that's seen us through to a point where we can see an end, we can see light at the end of the tunnel, we can see a vaccine coming. You can imagine that the spring might look really rather different. There will be business failures along the way, and there are clearly already huge numbers of job losses that are concentrated in places that can least afford to have them. So there are some big consequences. I think we're seeing businesses keen to adapt. We're seeing them keen to think about how they use their spaces and to do what they can to keep trading.
Absolutely, you're absolutely spot on with that assessment. I think it's certainly some of the intelligence we've been picking up on the ground is consistent with that view. Let's look ahead in terms of 2021. You mentioned green technology earlier. Maybe an example of one of the exciting opportunities available to us and the UK in terms of establishing or re-establishing a further USP for Liverpool in terms of how we can adapt to that. Tony, through the work of the Economic Recovery Plan and the idea around housing retrofit and house building, just wonder how Liverpool can potentially capitalise upon this sort of potential green revolution, and also meet the needs of a population that needs good housing stock.
Thanks, Paul. I think in one way we could say that one of our biggest problems is also a really big opportunity here, because if you look at the housing stock in Liverpool, we have an older and more poorly insulated housing stock than almost any other city in the country. 40% of our emissions in the city come from the existing housing stock. That's against a national average of about 10%. So investment in retrofit and investment in potentially clearance in some cases and new build will have a dramatic impact on reducing emissions in the city. But also at the same time, we know that retrofit programs done properly with local supply chains, etc., create 1.5 jobs for every 1 job that you get in new build. So in terms of creating job opportunities, and particularly job opportunities where entry-level, semi-skilled work, you can get people up to that quickly to be able to access those opportunities. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of building a proper supply chain to do that, to really make the most of that. It's hugely important. And of course, you can tackle really significant issues of affordable warmth for low-income families with all the benefits that brings, including now we won't go into the detail of this, but the education benefits for young people being able to do homework in warm environments and actually getting out of bed and going to school on really cold mornings in the winter, when going to school is incredibly important. Make no bones about that. So I think we've put a really clear submission into government. We're talking to potential funders about innovative models for how we can bring private capital to the table and have conversations with government as well. Government have responded with a scheme that, if I'm brutally honest, I think needs more work. And I've had this conversation with Treasury and with Bays about this, to say that we're missing some opportunities to maximise the economic benefits from this and the at-scale opportunity that's there. So we're really trying to build the case for that. I'm sure we'll get there, but also in terms of new build, building much more sustainable communities, working with the likes of Dr. Stephen Finnegan at University of Liverpool, who's genuinely a leader in zero carbon development, etc., and great private sector partners. I think we can do some really, really interesting things in places like Stonebridge Cross, Festival Garden site, retrofit housing. We're doing a big asset management review at the moment to identify sites for further development in the city. And I think we can do some really, really interesting things, generate a lot of jobs and critically reduce emissions. And then, of course, there's other things, the wider work in the city region around hydrogen, around exploiting our tidal power to generate electricity, and the great sort of academic capacity we've got here to innovate. And one thing nobody's had a chance to mention yet, and I'm sure Jessica would agree with this, is it's critically important that Liverpool doesn't see itself as an island on its own, but we need to harness the potential in the Northwest. And I'm really, if you look at it from a health and life sciences point of view or an innovation point of view, that link between Liverpool, Manchester and Alderley Park, for example, I think is critically important in demonstrating this part of the world can be genuinely world leading in some significant issues. And I think Liverpool has every right to be a confident, full partner in those discussions going forwards, and not think that we're in competition. Competition's for the football field, to be honest, the odd bidding regime for government. Completely agree with Jessica's point. And I'm worried about the future of devolution, with government getting back into challenge funding pots, when if it's about levelling up, we should be using resources much more strategically. But we shouldn't let that detract from the fact that if you look at this through a Chinese lens or a North American lens, the Northwest is one place. And those two cities and the symbiotic relationship between them is a strength for both that we need to build on. So in all sorts of ways, we need to be confident, and we need to keep building those links and those relationships, because it's absolutely key to create the conditions for investment and business growth, in my view.
Yeah, the methodology certainly seems a bit strange when we've talked repeatedly over the last sort of 5 years about agglomerating the collective assets of the north, and then you have sort of authority areas effectively having to compete with one another for the relevant bits of funding for specific projects.
Paul, might it just be that the Treasury ran out of time in terms of how to allocate the funds, and so they put it all in a pot, and maybe there's some further conversations to be had. I don't know, but I think it's worth some conversations.
I think I'll play a dead bat on that point, but certainly there's some methodological intrigue going on there. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to pick up at the point there about supply chains being geared up to deliver some of this and the skills requirements associated with that. Adam, as a Liverpool-based architectural firm, of course, you must have to adapt a lot to changes in the marketplace when it comes from a design perspective. And I just wonder if you could just, maybe for a moment or two, just reflect on how you do that and how you're sort of adapting yourself and your sector is adapting to some of these opportunities that are coming through.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's well recognised within our sector. Certainly, housing predominantly is something that is being looked at. It's evolving hugely over this period, with people staying within their home environment so much at the moment. The whole idea of this like kind of live-work relationship. And the whole idea of what it means to work at home. I think everybody at the very beginning was working, or certainly myself, I was working in the bay window of my property, and that can only last for so long. And certainly you have to dedicate a particular space in the home. So we have seen like some developers looking at how to go and create those work environments within the home, which don't have to be have to stay as a singular use, but can actually change into a multitude of different functions, which is combined again with the health sector, etc. And obviously everybody's tried to find innovative ways to train at home or do some form of physical exercise, etc. And that still comes into part of the residential. Basically looking forward, and apologies, in terms of looking forward, like what's happening with the changes of like how people are looking at residences as a whole. I think there's going to be huge developments over the next couple of years to what that means, but certainly not to go and say anything against the requirements and the necessity of offices, which do need to be there.
Thanks, Adam. Just a forewarning to the panelists. I'm going to give you 30 seconds shortly just to sum up your view on 2021 and your outlook. I think we'll just touch on skills just before we do that, if that's okay. And as we've just talked about, we've got a big challenge around the next generation of people coming into this sector. And so Tony and I have spent many meetings talking about the importance of education. I just wonder if you could ask the panel for some views in terms of how, as succinctly as possible, how do we actually enable the next generation of talent to come through in this, which is a wide-ranging discipline when we look at property construction and infrastructure. How do we begin to tackle that, and what's some of the lessons that we can learn from what's happened so far in your own organisations? I go to Dave for this as a starting point, please.
Yeah, I think a couple of areas we're certainly concentrating on. New ways of engaging with education. We're currently doing virtual tours and the likes to interest people back into the industry. And there are those who've been displaced as a result of the pandemic as well, that we can bring back and teach new skills. And in an area we're also focusing on, in order to broaden the catchment area, I suppose, of our workforce, is that around diversity and inclusion. Waits have made a considerable commitment to developing our diverse and inclusive offerings and engage with a much broader potential workforce than we have previously. So as a result of that, I'm confident that we can certainly increase in the construction sector our capability to deliver over the next few years.
Fantastic. Any other panellists like to come in on skills?
I think the key thing is to try and make it seem exciting and an industry that's vibrant and exciting and something you can be proud to be involved in. I think historically construction and property have been seen as difficult, real mucky, hard work sector to be in, which of course elements of it are. But I think we could probably all say that anybody involved in construction and property has a sense of pride in what they've achieved that I can't imagine many other sectors have in terms of the placemaking and what comes out the back of it. So I think if we try and put more and more effort into effectively selling the sector as placemaking and what comes out the other side of it, rather than it being perhaps the industrial feel that it had historically as a sector, I think as a sector we can offer some huge opportunities for people to get involved in some really exciting projects and really leave the cities that they're working in far better than they started off working in, because of the projects that they'll be involved in and the engagement with the public sector and what they leave behind as a legacy from their careers. So I think if we can make it exciting and get that message across, it's a great sector to get people into.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tony, I can't let you go through a session like this without mentioning skills.
Now, look, I agree with everything everybody said here. I think one of the really big challenges for us is to create really clear, credible pathways for young people from where they are now into good jobs, so that we don't lose that aspiration and we build ambition, and then we support it with great education and then ongoing learning and development. And we build an ecosystem for our labour market that really will work. We've got a lot of young people in the city, a lot of whom are not getting into the right opportunities at the moment. So I think there's a lot of work to do together, and I think it's mutually beneficial. And it's one of the things we really need to start to focus on properly next year. And I think we can make a real difference, and it will have all sorts of wider benefits. And critically important for me as well, it'll help us build productivity at a time when we're coming out of recession, and that to me is really important as well.
Thanks, Tony. Right, I gave you some forewarning, all of you. I'm going to do it in reverse order from how you introduced yourselves. So, Andrew, 30 seconds, please, on 2021.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough start to 2021, but I think we've got the advantage in this sector that we haven't stopped like other sectors have, and we've largely, apart from a couple of days here and there that Dave mentioned, we've been able to continue. Very clear government support, public sector support, and the demand fundamentally hasn't changed. So I think it can be a great 2021 if we look how to get through it rather than worrying about it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo exactly the same thing. It can be a fantastic year as long as we're all focused on that, not frightened of innovation, not frightened of testing new ideas out and being prepared to fail at some of those ideas and correct and create better ones from that. Certainly, like we're all going to face those struggles, but it is the benefit to our sector. It is the benefit to our sector. Apologies that we haven't stopped and we have got like a view to get out of it. So I think as long as we push forward, as long as we keep our eyes on the prize, and as long as we keep on singing about Liverpool and the surrounding regions, then it can only work positively for us.
Thanks, Adam. Jessica?
I think it's the time to get on and do the things that we've been thinking about and planning for, and continue to look for those win-wins, recognising that if we pull together, if we work with our partners, if we work across city boundaries, we'll be stronger.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I'm the eternal optimist. I think we've learnt a lot through the crisis. We're an incredibly resilient bunch in our sector, and we've found new ways of working, and I'm keen to certainly push forward into 2021 despite the challenges that may come in the first few quarters, and use them new ways we've learnt to become more productive and help in the regeneration of the Liverpool area in the northwest.
Thank you, Dave. Finally to you, Tony.
Really challenging times ahead. Really important that we play to our strengths and don't try to be something we're not. We've got some great strengths to build on. Public sector needs to really concentrate on its role in creating the conditions to build investor and business confidence, and with great partnerships, create the space for the private sector to do the rest. And when we've got mass vaccination in place, have the party of all parties that goes on for at least a year to drive growth and get everybody feeling great about the city again.
Thank you, Tony. I'm sure everyone shares that particular hope, expectation and excitement for that party, and we've still got a Premier League title to celebrate as a Liverpool fan as well. Look, I'd just like to thank each of the panellists for their contribution this morning, and also to MSP for hosting myself and Dave and the event itself. This is a new way of working and delivering events. It's been brilliant to be here today. It demonstrates, MSP have demonstrated how business can continue in the most difficult of circumstances. Look, from a chamber perspective, I can only praise partners who we have worked with during this year. It's been absolutely unprecedented. There you go, COVID bingo. But it has, and to see partners come together across the city and the city region to tackle this together, to advocate to government, to get the things that we have taken a leadership role on is absolutely incredible. And I think it's put Liverpool in such an excellent position going forward. We've just got the next few months to endure, but coming out of that, I think the future is very, very bright. A couple of events to signpost you towards over the coming weeks. We've got our Well Connected networking event on the 4th of December, and we've got our virtual Christmas Carol service on the 8th of December. I won't be singing. Thank you all, for those of you who are watching live. There will be a recording of this session as well. And stay safe, get tested, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.